dressed like civilians, operating in the dead of night and lurking around every corner. A unit so brutal it was even feared by its own army. Yet no one knew they existed. But how did Hitler create the most secretive commandos of the war? And why could no one ever stop them? This is the dark truth about Hitler's most evil battalion. A group of specialized Nazi soldiers wearing Dutch military uniforms crosses over to Holland. Their mission? To secure a bridge over the Meuse River at Gennep. German infantry and armor were already en route, and crossing the bridge would be essential for the Dutch invasion. On May 10th, the German tanks began rolling in, sparking the Brandenburgers into action. Disguised as Dutch military police, escorting German prisoners, 8 commandos struck the bridge, taking them by surprise and overwhelming force. Seeing this chaos and losing 2 guard posts, the Dutch kicked into action. But since they didn't want to fire on their own, the disguises worked, and in less than an hour as the first Panzers arrived, the Brandenburgers secured victory. Missions like this would become a common theme, striking fear in the hearts of the enemies, blurring the lines between fiction and reality, leaving the Allies with one question: who can we trust? As the Second World War erupted, the German Wehrmacht had high ambitions. Their first missions involved taking countries such as Poland, Denmark, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Norway, which were all part of a strategy to gain control and overwhelm France with a powerful force. Yet it needed critical infrastructure, such as railways, bridges, and roads, to move large armor and artillery around the battlefield. Once the armies began rolling in, the Allied forces quickly moved to secure bridges, planting bombs with detonators that were to explode whenever the Germans approached. The Germans were aware of this tactic, with 3 specialized groups already in the German ranks, known as Abwehr 1, 2, and 3. Hauptmann Theodor von Hippel approached Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, the man in charge of Abwehr 1, the German intelligence service. He proposed small groups, highly trained and willing to sacrifice themselves behind enemy lines. He got the green light, and Germany began recruiting border troops, often inside already occupied territories. They needed individuals who understood different cultures, knew how to blend in, and were loyal enough that they would not falter under pressure. The first unit, named Baulehr-Bataillon ZBV 800, would be born, consisting of 80 commandos, mostly of Polish descent. They received about 7 months of training at their headquarters in Brandenburg, hence the name Brandenburgers, and would infiltrate Poland as railway workers, with the main goal of securing the Polish railway network for German advances. As a former member, Helmut Schwinkler remarked, "Unlike the rest of the army who were told to leave the thinking to the horses because their heads are bigger, we were encouraged to think for ourselves and to develop intuition and resourcefulness." The mission kicked into action in the autumn of 1939, when sleeper cells surprised the Polish forces. In fact, they were so successful that one group even managed to convince a battalion of Polish troops to board a train and leave. Ultimately, they were highly successful in taking most of the Polish railway network. Yet not all the commandos made it out alive. A short delay in the invasion meant that some commandos blew their cover too soon, copping a lot of fire from the Polish forces. Many died in the shootouts, and the Germans were left scrambling. They eventually blamed it on Slovakian terrorists, but for the most part, the operation was a success, and even Hitler called for its expansion, believing they could be used to take down every enemy force before they knew what hit them. However, back in Berlin, the Germans were already plotting a move to expand its territorial gain. It quickly expanded into Europe, and the Brandenburgers jumped from 80 to 600 operators by 1940. They were deployed all over the Western Front in countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Their mission, the same as it was in Poland, they'd dress up as enemy troops, or even just locals, establish a home base and entrench themselves with the militaries of the Allies. Once the Germans gave the command and the Wehrmacht began marching on a target, the troops kicked into action, essentially attacking the Allies from within, or using coercion to get them to move from their stations. The Wehrmacht swooped in and took strategic positions and cleared the way for raids on bigger cities like Warsaw, and later even Paris. But when Germany targeted the east, they ran into a completely different problem with its own Italian ally. By 1941, the only German allies were Italy. However, they faced stiff resistance from Greece and needed support. Hitler ordered Operation Marita, one that would capture northern Greece, providing more protection for its Romanian oil fields. Greece also provided a strategic flanking opportunity for Operation Barbarossa, which saw Germany invade the Soviet Union. However, taking it would prove far more difficult than initially thought. The mountainous terrain of northern Greece made it perfect for defensive positions, and a conventional invasion would lead to mass casualties. So, once again, the Brandenburgers were sent in. Again, the commandos entered, fully disguised, penetrating deep behind enemy lines, but focusing on strategic locations. Within a few days, they took over the Vardar, the longest river in North Macedonia, while securing a gorge on the river Danube, which formed a natural border between Romania and Serbia. By now, German troops were stationed right next to the Iron Gate. Yet, reaching the Iron Gates and going through them would require a force so powerful that even the Soviets feared them. The most important resource of the Second World War was oil, and Germany needed to get their hands on as much of it as possible if they were to use the massive Tiger II tank. With most of it located in Maikop, the capital city of Adygea, Russia, the Germans concocted a plan to invade. Led by Adrian von Felkesum, 62 Germans of Baltic and Sudeten descent disguised themselves as NKVD men in August 1942. They arrived in trucks, swiftly moving through the Soviet front lines, penetrating deep behind the Iron Curtain. On their way, they encountered large battalions of the Red Army, but fearing the NKVD, or secret Soviet police, they were easily deceived, even being told to retreat or deploy to different regions. Slowly, the Brandenburgers whittled down the enemy resistance before striking from within Maikop and delivering the town to the Nazis. Fortunately, the Soviets sabotaged many of the oil fields while retreating, but it was once again a strategic victory for the Germans. Thanks to the Brandenburgers, the Nazis were now firmly staring down Soviet territory, while the Red Army didn't know who to trust among their own ranks. Their missions inside the Soviet territories would be even more cunning, especially to prevent the Red Army from blowing up bridges. They arrived in 2 trucks, with commandos speaking fluent Russian. The first truck crossed the bridge, stopping on the other side, while the second looked like it malfunctioned in the middle of the bridge. The commandos pleaded with the Soviets not to blow up the bridge until the second truck crossed, giving them time to hop out of the first truck, locate the charges, and disable them. Often their cover was blown, and all hell broke loose, yet the Germans managed to overrun these positions and secure the bridges. But as Operation Barbarossa kicked off, the Germans believed they had the upper hand in the war, with hundreds of Brandenburgers now behind enemy lines. However, the Soviets were ready for them. What these commandos didn't know was that the Red Army employed a password system at various checkpoints. This meant that when a truck passed through a military checkpoint, they were tasked with providing a secret code, one that changed every night. The Germans, unaware of this, began blowing their covers one after the other, with most facing almost immediate execution. Meanwhile, Germany was slowly losing their strong grip on the large swath of territory it once occupied. Resources became scarce, and funding such elaborate operations became almost impossible. Many were abandoned while still conducting an operation, while a large group of these men were also redeployed as standard troops, who'd be mostly deployed to the front lines in the east. Following the war, rumors suggested that the SS was largely to blame for disbanding the Brandenburgers. They became jealous of their success and fame as the most coveted regiment in the German military. With many Brandenburgers returning to a hero's welcome, the SS saw them as a threat to their power and influence, and by 1943, a new unit, the SS Jägerbataillon 502, led by Otto Skorzeny, was created. They operated largely under the SS Jagdverband Mitte and SS Jagdverband Ost, with more than 1,800 Brandenburgers being redeployed to these units. The rest of these commandos found themselves holding up the front lines, where many of them would meet their end at the hands of the Soviets. Following the German surrender, many of the Brandenburgers lost their lives, with others using their skills to simply disappear. Some would resurface, joining the French Foreign Legion, and partake in the First Indochina War, a place where their critical skills were highly valuable. Seeing without being seen was their motto, yet today they are hardly remembered. Unlike the Soviet night witches whose legacy still remains intact. Make sure to check out how they terrorized the Germans and turned the tide of war into the Soviet favor.